She was being forced to marry a stranger to hide her pregnancy, and when the man at the altar turned around and whispered, "Do you remember me?" her whole world stopped, because she knew that voice, that face, that August night she'd spent 8 weeks trying to forget. She had no idea he was an alpha, no idea his world ran secret and ancient beneath New York's streets. And she had absolutely no idea that the baby she was carrying had just made her part of something that couldn't be undone. Welcome to Love Under the Full Moon. We're so glad you're here. Drop your name where you're watching from. The dress was the wrong shade of white. Bryn Calloway had not chosen it. She had not chosen the lily bouquet, or the cathedral venue on Fifth Avenue, or the string quartet playing something painfully classical in a room full of people she barely recognized. She had not chosen any of it, because none of this was for her. It was for Vivian Calloway, her mother, and the image Vivian had spent 30 years carefully constructing in the social circles of Manhattan. Bryn stood in the dressing room off the main hall, staring at her reflection in a mirror framed with gold leaf, and thought about how many ways this day could go wrong. She counted at least 11. "Stop fidgeting," Vivian said, appearing behind her, adjusting the veil with practiced fingers and zero warmth. "You'll wrinkle the fabric." "I'm not fidgeting. I'm considering escape routes." Vivian's eyes met hers in the mirror, cold, precise. "You're not going anywhere." That was the thing about her mother. She didn't threaten. She stated facts. Bryn turned away from her own reflection. She didn't recognize the woman in the mirror, pale, dressed in ivory silk, hair pinned in perfect curls. That wasn't her. Bryn Calloway wore paint-stained jeans and graphic tees. She took her coffee black and her deadlines seriously. She lived in a third-floor walk-up in Queens and argued with clients who didn't understand the difference between a font and a typeface. She did not get married in cathedrals on Fifth Avenue. And yet, "I want to know his name," Bryn said, not for the first time. "Grayson Mercer." Vivian smoothed an invisible wrinkle from the skirt. "He's 31. His family has been in New York for 3 generations. The Mercer Group has holdings in—" "I don't care about his holdings." "Then care about yours." Vivian turned her by the shoulders, voice dropping to something that might have been mistaken for intimacy. "You made a mistake, Bryn. A foolish, careless mistake. This marriage fixes it, quietly, before anyone finds out. Before your life is ruined, before it's even started." Bryn said nothing. The mistake. That was what her mother called it. 8 weeks ago. A terrible week at work, a client who'd taken her design and refused to pay, a broken air conditioner in August heat, and a friend who had dragged her to a bar in Midtown she'd never been to before. She had not planned to stay. She had not planned to meet anyone. She had absolutely not planned to sit at the far end of the bar, talking to a stranger for 3 hours about everything and nothing. Architecture, the best cheap pizza in New York, what it felt like to look at a city skyline and feel both small and enormous at the same time. She had not planned the way the whiskey had loosened something in her chest, or the way he'd looked at her like she was saying something worth hearing, which was more than most people bothered to do. She remembered his hands, long fingers around a glass, the way he'd laughed, quiet and real, not performed, the way the evening had tilted sideways into something she hadn't named because naming things made them real. She didn't remember his name. She was almost certain she had told him hers. She had left before morning, slipping out while the city was still grey and half asleep, telling herself it was better that way, cleaner. No awkward goodbyes, no phone numbers exchanged. Just one night that had happened and would stay where it belonged, in the past, in a bar in Midtown, in a version of herself that she was already leaving behind. Except, 6 weeks later, 2 pink lines on a test she'd taken alone in her bathroom, sitting on the edge of the tub, not breathing. 4 days after that, Vivian, somehow already knowing, standing in Bryn's apartment with a solution already prepared. A name, a family, a wedding, quick and clean, before the gossip could start. "He won't even know," Vivian had said. "Men like that don't look closely enough." Bryn had said no. Then Bryn had said no again. Then Vivian had made 3 phone calls, cancelled 2 of Bryn's client contracts, and reminded her that the apartment she lived in was technically still in the family's name. And now Bryn was here, in the wrong shade of white, holding flowers she hadn't chosen, about to marry a man whose face she had not yet seen. "It's time," the wedding coordinator said, appearing in the doorway with a headset and the energy of someone managing a military operation. Vivian straightened Bryn's veil one final time. "Smile," she said, "and mean it." Bryn walked out of the dressing room, down the side corridor, and paused at the entrance to the main hall. The doors were closed. The music had shifted. Something slower now. The signal. She thought about the bar, the stranger, the way he'd said just before she left that he hoped whatever came next was good to her. She took a breath. The doors opened, the cathedral stretched before her, stone and light, and 300 people she didn't know, all rising to their feet. Bryn walked. She kept her eyes forward. She counted her steps because it was something to do. She reminded herself that she was strong and sarcastic and had survived worse than this. She reached the altar. The man standing at the end of it had his back to her. Tall, dark jacket, broad shoulders. Something about the line of them struck her as familiar, in a way she couldn't place, like a word on the tip of her tongue. The officiant gestured. The man turned, and Bryn Calloway's heart stopped completely. She knew that face. She knew the line of that jaw, the dark hair, the particular way those grey eyes focused on something, or someone, with total undivided attention. She knew him from a bar in Midtown, from 3 hours of conversation and whiskey, from a morning she'd spent 8 weeks trying not to think about. He looked at her, and then, slowly, with something in his expression that she could not read, he leaned forward, close enough that only she could hear, and said 4 quiet words. "Do you remember me?" The question hung between them like smoke. The officiant was speaking. The music had faded. 300 people were watching with the polite, expectant faces of people who had no idea that the world had just rearranged itself completely. Bryn stared at him. He stared back. His eyes were the same grey she remembered. The color of the sky before rain, steady and still, in a way that made her feel like the ground was moving under her feet instead of standing perfectly solid beneath her heels. He hadn't changed. 8 weeks, and he looked exactly the same as he had in that bar, except now he was wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and there was a cathedral full of witnesses between them and any chance of pretending this wasn't happening. "The ring," someone whispered. Bryn realized she hadn't moved. The officiant cleared his throat gently. If the bride would take her place. Bryn took her place. She didn't know what else to do. Her body moved on autopilot, steps, position facing forward, while her brain ran in 12 directions simultaneously, none of them useful. She found one coherent thought and held onto it. Do not make a scene. Not here. Not in front of Vivian, who was seated in the front row looking like a woman who had just won a chess match she'd been playing for months. The ceremony began. Bryn kept her eyes straight ahead, on the officiant, on the stone arch behind him, on anything except the man standing 2 feet to her left, who had apparently also been forced into this cathedral without knowing who was waiting at the other end of the aisle. She risked a glance. He was watching her, not the officiant, not the congregation, her. With an expression she couldn't fully decode, surprise, yes, but something else underneath it. Something that looked almost like recognition, deeper than just memory, like finding something he hadn't realized he'd been looking for. It made her deeply uncomfortable, mostly because she recognized it. She looked away. The officiant spoke about commitment and partnership and the foundation of a shared life. Bryn listened to the words without absorbing them. She was busy cataloguing everything she knew about this man, which was simultaneously a lot and almost nothing. She knew he was funny, genuinely funny, not the kind of funny that performed for an audience. She knew he listened. She knew he'd ordered his whiskey neat and hadn't tried to change her order when she'd asked for hers on the rocks. She knew he'd argued passionately about the architectural failure of a building on 57th Street and then laughed at himself for caring so much. She knew the way he'd looked at her that night, like she was interesting, not decorative, not convenient, interesting. She did not know his last name. She had not known, apparently, that his last name was Mercer, that he ran a company, that somewhere in the gap between that bar and this altar, their mothers had apparently conspired to make this exact moment happen. Actually, she corrected herself, her mother had conspired. She had no information about his. Do you, Grayson Thomas Mercer, take Bryn as your lawfully wedded wife? A beat. She felt him look at her again. I do, he said. His voice was calm, low, the voice she remembered. And do you, Bryn Catherine Calloway, take Grayson as your lawfully wedded husband? The cathedral was very quiet. Bryn thought about walking out. She genuinely considered it, the logistics, the consequences, the look on Vivienne's face. She thought about the alternative, about what she was carrying, about the fact that the man beside her had not apparently run screaming when he'd seen her face, which meant either he had more self-control than any human being had a right to, or he was waiting to have a very different conversation later. She thought about one night in August when someone had actually listened to her. I do, she said. The ring was placed on her finger. Cool metal, a simple band, nothing ostentatious, which surprised her, given everything else about the day. She noted it, filed it away. I now pronounce you husband and wife. The cathedral exhaled. 300 people began to applaud. Bryn stared at her new husband. He stared back at her. And then, just barely, just at the corner of his mouth, something shifted. Not quite a smile, more like the beginning of one, held carefully in check. He offered her his arm. Mrs. Mercer, he said quietly. Don't, she said with equal quiet. Not yet. He nodded once, accepting that. And they walked back down the aisle together, through the applause, through the flower petals someone was scattering from a balcony, through the noise and light and complete unreality of it all. Outside the cathedral, in the brief moment before the reception crowd descended, he turned to her. We need to talk, he said. We need to talk, she agreed, but not here. The reception will be loud and full of people my mother invited to watch her win. Bryn glanced back at the doors. How long do we have before we're surrounded? He checked his watch. Something about the gesture was so ordinary that it made her chest do something strange. 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. Okay, she faced him directly. Just tell me one thing first. Whatever you need. Did you know it was me? Before today? He looked at her steadily, not away, not sideways, at her. No, he said. I didn't. She studied his face for the lie. She was good at finding lies. It was practically a survival skill growing up in Vivienne Calloway's house. She didn't find one. Okay, she said again. The cathedral doors burst open. The crowd spilled out. Vivienne appeared, glowing with satisfaction, already steering people toward the reception venue. Grayson leaned close just for a second. We're going to figure this out, he said, low enough for only her. Or we're going to have the most interesting divorce in Manhattan history, she replied. This time, the almost smile became a real one. And Bryn Calloway, Bryn Mercer, filed that away too, and told herself firmly that it didn't mean anything. She almost believed it. The reception was exactly as terrible as Bryn had predicted. The venue was a penthouse ballroom in Midtown, all glass walls and city views, and tables drowning in white floral arrangements that cost more than Bryn made in a month. A jazz quartet played in one corner. Waitstaff moved through the room with champagne glasses and small plates of food so architectural it barely counted as eating. Bryn accepted a glass of sparkling water. She'd given up champagne 8 weeks ago without explanation, and positioned herself near a window with a direct sightline to both exits. She had been doing this since she was 12. Vivian's events were endurance sports. "You're calculating escape vectors." Grayson appeared at her side, quiet and unhurried, 2 glasses of water in hand. He set one on the windowsill beside hers and looked out at the city. "I had you at 2 exits," he said. "Service stairs behind the kitchen if the elevators get blocked." She turned to look at him. "I do the same thing," he said simply. They stood in silence for a moment, which should have been uncomfortable and somehow wasn't. Below them, Manhattan glittered in the late afternoon light, the relentless, indifferent geometry of it, towers and bridges and the dark line of the river. "This wasn't your idea," she said. "Not a question." "No." He didn't elaborate immediately. Then, "My mother called me 3 days ago, said there was a business arrangement that required my presence at a wedding, gave me a name, a time, an address, said the families had been in conversation for weeks. She didn't tell you who. She mentioned your family's name. She didn't tell me." He paused. Something moved through his expression, careful and controlled. "She didn't tell me it was you. You didn't think to ask for a photo, a description, anything?" "I trusted her." A beat. "That was clearly a mistake." Bryn laughed, sharp and involuntary, the kind that escapes before you can stop it. He glanced at her, and the corner of his mouth did the almost smile thing again. "I'm glad it's funny to one of us," he said. "It's not funny, it's just—" She shook her head. "It's the most absurd thing that has ever happened to me, and I once had a client try to pay me in cryptocurrency and a framed photo of himself." He stared at her. "It was a very large photo," she said. He laughed, a real one this time, quiet, brief, real. She remembered that laugh. "Tell me what you know," he said, when they'd both settled back into the reality of the situation. "About why your mother arranged this." Bryn looked out at the city. She had not planned on having this conversation today. She had planned on having it in 2 weeks, maybe 3, in a lawyer's office with appropriate documentation. She turned to face him. "She told you nothing." "Only the basics. There's something she told you, something specific, something she used to make this feel necessary." She watched his face. "Tell me." He was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that meant he was deciding something. Then he set his glass down and looked at her directly. "She said you were pregnant." The room didn't stop. The jazz quartet kept playing. The waitstaff kept moving. 300 people kept laughing and eating and celebrating a marriage they understood even less than the people in it. Bryn felt the air go out of her lungs anyway. "She told you," she said. "This morning, 2 hours before the ceremony. She called me and told me there was something I needed to know before I made any decisions." His voice was careful, measured. "She said you were 8 weeks along and that the circumstances were complicated. She had no right." Bryn's voice came out low and precise. "That was mine to tell. That was my... She had absolutely no right." "I know. She did it to make sure you wouldn't run. She did it to trap you into staying because she knew if you found out later you'd..." "Bryn." She stopped. He was watching her with something that wasn't pity. She would have walked away from pity. This was something else, steadier, more careful, like he was paying close attention to something important. "I know," he said again. I'm not telling you to justify how it happened. I'm telling you because I don't want to keep things from you. We're apparently married. whatever that means. I think we should at least start with honesty." She stared at him. "You're very calm for someone who just found out his mother arranged his marriage and he's apparently going to be a father," she said. "I'm not calm," he said. "I'm controlled. There's a difference." She considered that. Fair. There's something else. He held her gaze. "I need to tell you something about myself. Something that—" He glanced around the room, at the crowd, at the glass walls and the city beyond. "Not here, not tonight, but soon, before you make any decisions about what you want to do next." Bryn looked at him for a long moment. The stranger from the bar, her husband apparently, by every legal definition. The father of something the size of a walnut that was currently making her unable to eat anything with an interesting smell. "What kind of something?" she asked. He met her eyes. "The kind that changes how you see everything," he said. "But I need you to trust me long enough to hear it." She had trusted him once before, in a bar in Midtown, for 3 hours, and then she had left before it could become something she'd have to think about. She was thinking about it now. "Fine," she said, "but I want something in return." "Name it." "I want your actual phone number, not arranged through my mother or yours, just yours." Something in his expression shifted, softened, barely perceptibly. He took her phone from her hand, and she let him, which was either trust or insanity, she wasn't sure which, typed in a number and handed it back. "That's my personal line," he said. "Nobody has that number unless I give it to them." She looked down at the screen. Grayson Mercer, a 917 number. "Nobody?" she said. "Nobody." Bryn put her phone away. Across the room, Vivian caught her eye and smiled, the smile of a woman who believed she had won. Bryn looked away first. Whatever game her mother thought she was playing, she had just made one significant miscalculation. She had handed two people with good instincts and no interest in being managed to each other, locked them in a legal agreement, and assumed neither of them would figure out a better play. Vivian, for all her strategic brilliance, had never understood that the best moves weren't the ones that controlled the board. They were the ones that changed the game entirely. She had planned to tell him herself. That was the thing Bryn kept coming back to. 3 days after the wedding, standing in the kitchen of the Upper West Side apartment that Grayson had quietly insisted she move into. Separate rooms, separate lives operating on polite parallel tracks. No pressure, he'd said, and she'd believed him mostly because he hadn't pushed anything. She had planned to tell him. Not today. Not in this kitchen, in this apartment that still smelled like someone else's life. She'd had a whole timeline in her head. Get through the wedding, establish some kind of basic human understanding with this stranger she'd married, find the right moment, have the conversation properly. Vivian had taken that from her too. Bryn set down her coffee and stared at the Manhattan skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was an absurd view, the kind of view that people spent their entire careers working toward. It made her feel like she was living inside someone else's story. "You knew before I could tell you," she said, without turning around. She heard him stop in the doorway behind her. She'd gotten used to his footsteps in 3 days, quieter than she expected for a man his size. "Yes," he said. "She called you the morning of the wedding, gave you information that was mine, used it as a leash, basically, to make sure you showed up." "Yes." "And you're not angry about that?" A pause. "I didn't say that." She turned around. He was leaning against the doorframe in a grey Henley and dark jeans, the most casual she'd seen him, and somehow worse for it, because it made him look less like a stranger and more like a person. He had coffee too. He'd apparently been up for a while. "You look angry," she observed. "I'm angry at the situation," he said, "not at you. You have a very consistent way of being precise about that." "I try," He straightened, crossed to the other side of the kitchen island, maintaining the comfortable distance they'd established without ever discussing it. "How are you feeling? Physically, I mean." She blinked. "What?" He gestured, slightly uncertain for the first time. "You're 8 weeks. I read that the first trimester can be—" "You read about it." He looked at her steadily. "Of course I did." Bryn stared at him. Something moved in her chest that she immediately identified as dangerous, and filed away under things not to think about. "The mornings are bad," she said after a moment. "The smells are worse. I can't drink coffee, which is actively ruining my personality. The coffee you're holding is decaf. Don't say anything." "I wasn't going to say anything. You were going to say something supportive and well-researched, and it was going to be annoying." He looked at her with the specific expression of a man choosing silence over the several things he could say, and she respected it. "I wanted to tell you myself," she said, quieter now. "I know. I had a whole plan, a reasonable adult plan that involved," she gestured vaguely, "privacy, agency, the basic dignity of controlling my own information. Your mother took that." "Yes." The word came out harder than she intended. She softened it, just slightly. "I've spent a long time, longer than I should have, letting her take things. My choices, my timing, my—" She stopped. This was supposed to be different. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, the city hummed its constant frequency, traffic and wind and the low thrum of 8 million people going about their lives. "You can still tell me," he said. She looked at him. "Whatever you had planned to say," he continued, "however you'd planned to say it, it still matters. The fact that she got there first doesn't mean the conversation is over. It just means it started wrong." He set his coffee down, both hands on the island. "So, tell me." Bryn looked at this man who had, apparently, spent 3 days reading pregnancy literature and saying the right things without being asked and maintaining careful distances without being told, and felt the ground shift slightly under her feet. She took a breath. "I'm pregnant," she said. 10 weeks, the doctor confirmed it yesterday. I don't know." She paused. "I don't know what I was thinking that night, except that I wasn't thinking, which is extremely unlike me, and I am still annoyed about it. I don't know what any of this means for—" Another pause. "For any of it, but I thought you should know. Properly. From me." He nodded, listening. "That's it," she said. "That's the conversation." "Okay," he said. "Okay," she repeated, waiting for the rest of it. The complications, the questions, the version where he became suddenly strategic about this in a way she didn't like. Instead, he said, "Thank you for telling me." That was it. No additions. No fine print. She frowned. "You're going to just—" "Bryn." His voice was very calm. "I meant what I said at the reception. We start with honesty. You were honest. That's—" Something in his expression was careful and very genuine. "That matters to me." She looked at him for a long moment. "You said there was something you needed to tell me," she said finally. "Something that changes everything." "Yes." "Is now a good time?" He was quiet. She watched something move through his expression, consideration, assessment, a decision being made. "There's something I need to show you," he said. "Not tell, show." That's either very reassuring or extremely alarming. Probably a bit of both, he admitted. And for the second time in a week, Bryn Calloway found herself believing him, which was, she decided, the most alarming thing of all. He took her to the roof. 42 stories above the Upper West Side, the city spread in every direction, bridges and parks, and the dark ribbon of the Hudson to the west, the jagged skyline of Midtown to the south, Central Park, a rectangle of dark green in between. The wind moved through everything, cold and clear, carrying the particular smell of New York at dusk, concrete and rain, and something alive underneath it all. Bryn crossed her arms and waited. "I need you to keep an open mind," Grayson said. "I have a very open mind. You are one of the more skeptical people I've ever met." Skeptical and closed-minded are different things. I'll evaluate any evidence presented to me. I just have a low tolerance for nonsense. She looked at him. "What are we doing on the roof?" He faced her directly. In the fading evening light, something about his expression was different, less controlled than usual, or rather, controlled in a different direction, like he was holding something steady that very much wanted to move. "I'm going to tell you something," he said, "and then I'm going to show you, because telling isn't enough. You'd find 11 logical explanations, and none of them would be right." "Sounds accurate. Go ahead." "I'm a werewolf." Bryn stared at him. The city hummed. A siren moved through the streets below. Somewhere above them, a plane crossed the sky in a slow diagonal, its lights blinking red and white. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Okay," she said. "I have questions. I imagine you do. Like full moon howling the whole—" She gestured broadly at the air. "Situation?" "Some of that. Not all. The full moon part is more nuanced than the movies suggest." "The movies," she repeated. "You've watched the movies." "I've watched all of them, mostly for accuracy purposes. It's about 10% accurate for the record." "Which 10%? "The loyalty, the pack structure, the heightened senses." He paused. "The general preference for red meat." She laughed. She couldn't help it. It came out sudden and somewhat hysterical, and she covered her mouth with her hand and tried to get it back under control. He watched her without offense. "This is the part," she said once she'd steadied herself, "where a normal person would be more alarmed." "You're not alarmed. I'm processing. There's a difference." She uncrossed her arms. "Prove it. That's why we're on the roof." "Right. Okay." She stepped back, giving him space. "Prove it." What happened next was something Bryn would spend a long time afterward trying to find adequate language for, and never quite manage. It wasn't violent, it wasn't monstrous. It wasn't anything like the movies, which she noted to herself appeared to be about 90% inaccurate. There was a moment of stillness, and then something shifted in the space around Grayson, like the air itself was making room. And then he was different, larger, broader, the lines of him transformed into something that was both him and beyond him. Silver-grey fur catching the last of the light, eyes the same particular shade of grey they'd always been, but luminous now. Alert, he sat, patient, watching her. She stood very still. "Okay," she said finally, into the enormous quiet. "Okay, so that's—" She exhaled. "That's real." He shifted back. It took seconds. He straightened, and he was Grayson again, slightly rumpled, watching her carefully. "You didn't run," he said. "I'm on a roof. There's nowhere to run." She paused. "Also, you're the same color as you are as a person, which is somehow the most disorienting detail. Silver-gray tends to run in my family." She turned and looked out at the city for a moment. 42 stories below, 8 million people lived their ordinary lives with no idea that in a penthouse above Central Park, a graphic designer from Queens was recalibrating her entire understanding of reality. She turned back. "How many?" she asked. "How many what?" "Werewolves in New York." Something moved across his face. Surprise, and something almost like relief. She was asking the right question. He'd been prepared for different ones. "More than you'd think," he said. "The pack here is significant. The city works well for us. Crowds, movement, anonymity. Nobody looks closely enough to notice. The Mercer Group is real." It's also the pack's infrastructure, legitimate business, but it functions as the hub, housing, employment, security for pack members. She nodded slowly, assembling pieces. And your family has always run it. For 4 generations. Which makes you, what? The Alpha? Yes. She looked at him steadily. And the baby. He met her eyes. Yes. That's what I needed you to understand. Whatever the child inherits, it comes through both of us. It may be part wolf, she said. Yes. Bryn was quiet for a long moment. The wind moved through the rooftop. Below them, the park was going dark, the city brightening in its place. All those lit windows and moving lights. All those people living their particular lives. She thought about her apartment in Queens, her clients, her paint-stained jeans and her deadlines, and the careful, chosen smallness of the life she'd built. And then she thought about the bar, about a conversation that had felt even then like something outside ordinary time, about a man who had listened. So when you said you needed to tell me something that changes everything, she said. Yes. You meant everything. Yes. She leaned against the railing and looked at the skyline. Okay, she said, start from the beginning, tell me everything. He blinked. That's your response. You told me the truth. You could have hidden it. You didn't. She looked at him. Start talking, Mercer. I want to know what I'm married. And somewhere in the city below, the first full moon of autumn was just beginning to rise. She asked questions for 3 hours. Grayson had apparently prepared for exactly this. He had coffee, decaf already made, which she noticed and did not comment on, and answers that were precise without being rehearsed, which was the difference between someone who'd practiced a speech and someone who actually knew what they were talking about. She asked about biology, about the shift, what it felt like, whether it hurt, about how many people knew, about how the pack worked, its structure, its rules, its edges. He answered everything. When he didn't know something, he said so. By the time she ran out of immediate questions, it was past 11, and she was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor. She'd stopped feeling formal about the apartment around question 40. With a notepad she'd produced from somewhere, 3 pages of notes, and the particular feeling she got when a project was starting to make sense. The baby, she said. Yes. Tell me what you know. Actually know, not what you assume. He sat on the floor too, his back against the couch, with the ease of someone who didn't worry about dignity. Historically, children born from a human and a werewolf parent can go either way. Some shift, some don't. It's not predictable. The wolf element, if it's there, usually shows itself in the first year. How? Small things, heightened senses before the usual developmental stages, responding to pack members in ways that normal infants don't. The first shift, if it happens, is usually much later, adolescence. She wrote something. He watched her without rushing her. Is it dangerous? She asked. If the child shifts? No more than any other aspect of being what we are. We have people, pack doctors, specialists in adolescent wolves. It would be monitored, supported. The child wouldn't go through it alone. She looked up from her notes. Would I be involved in that? The question was more complicated than it sounded, and he understood that. His expression was careful. That's your choice, he said. Whatever the situation is between us, whatever we figure out, you're the child's mother. You're involved as much as you want to be. She held his gaze for a moment, then looked back at her notes. I want to meet them, she said. The pack. He was quiet. That's not a small thing. Bringing you in, introducing you formally. I know, I'm not saying tomorrow. She paused. How do they know about me, do they? They know I married. The news moved through the pack within an hour of the ceremony. It usually does. And what do they think? Different things. He was honest, which she'd come to expect. Some are cautious, some are curious. A pack takes its signals from its alpha. How I treat this situation will tell them what to think about it. And how are you treating this situation? He looked at her directly. Seriously, honestly, with respect for you. A beat. The same way I've treated every situation. She put her pen down. Your mother, she said. Tell me about your mother. Something shifted in his face. The first sign of actual complicated feeling she'd seen in 6 days. Eleanor Mercer. She's been running the pack's administrative side for 20 years, since my father died. He chose words carefully. Effective. Strategic. She loves the pack more than anything. Sometimes more than anything else. More than you. Not more, but alongside, in a way that's sometimes difficult to separate. And she arranged this without telling you the whole truth. She thought she was protecting the pack. His jaw tightened slightly, ensuring the Alpha's line continued. She's been worried about the pack's position, its strength. She saw an opportunity. She saw a pregnant woman from a good family and moved a chess piece. Yes. Bryn was quiet for a moment. Are you angry at her? Yes. Simple and unambiguous. It was wrong. She overstepped. We'll have that conversation. We've already started it. He looked at her. She's not going to be a problem for you, Bryn. I want to be clear about that. You can't promise that. You don't know how I might. I can promise that whatever happens, you won't face her alone. He said it without theater, without the weight of a dramatic declaration, just a fact, like a structural guarantee. That's not conditional. She looked at him for a long moment in the quiet apartment. I want to sleep on everything, she said finally. The pack, the meeting, all of it. Can this wait until tomorrow? Of course. She gathered her notepad and stood up. He stood too. They faced each other across the living room, the careful, respectful distance they'd maintained all week. Grayson. Yes. Thank you for telling me the truth. Something moved through his expression, something warmer than his usual careful steadiness. Thank you for asking the right questions, he said. She went to her room. She lay in the dark for a long time, not sleeping. She thought about the roof and the city and the grey wolf sitting patient and still in the evening light. She thought about a pack of people living in parallel to ordinary New York, hidden in plain sight. She thought about what she was carrying, half her stubbornness possibly, and half something ancient and extraordinary. She thought about Grayson Mercer, who read pregnancy books unprompted and sat on the floor when she did, and answered every question without making her feel foolish for asking. And then she thought, there's something his mother doesn't know yet. She'd handed her daughter to an alliance, a transaction, a piece to be moved. She had no idea who Bryn Calloway actually was. By the time Bryn fell asleep, she had the beginning of a plan. What she didn't know, what she would only understand later, was that 30 feet down the hallway, the alpha of the most powerful werewolf pack in New York was sitting awake in the dark, feeling something he hadn't felt since he was old enough to understand what the mate bond meant. The pull of it was quiet and enormous. Like the city below them, constant, inevitable, and just beginning. Eleanor Mercer arrived on a Tuesday. She did not call ahead. She used her key to Grayson's apartment, which was apparently something that had continued to exist through force of maternal habit. And she appeared in the kitchen at 9 in the morning, like a weather event that hadn't been on the forecast. She was a handsome woman. Bryn gave her that. Silver-streaked hair swept back with authority, a jacket that cost $1,000 and pretended not to, eyes the same grey as her son's, but colder at the resting position. She moved through the apartment like someone taking inventory of what had changed. Bryn was at the kitchen island with her decaf and her laptop, in jeans and her favorite paint-stained university sweater, 3 pages into fixing a logo that a client had managed to make worse with their feedback. She closed the laptop. Eleanor Mercer looked at her. Bryn looked back. "You're Bryn," Eleanor said, "and you're Eleanor." She did not stand up. "Can I get you something? There's coffee. I'm not allowed to have any, so I'll enjoy it vicariously." Eleanor moved into the kitchen with the particular precision of someone rearranging space to confirm who it belongs to. She poured herself coffee. She turned around. "I'd like to speak plainly," Eleanor said. "Please do. I arranged this marriage for the pack, not for Grayson and not for you. The pack needed stability, an heir, the Mercer line continuing." She set down her cup. "I don't apologize for that. A leader makes difficult choices for the people she protects." Bryn said. Eleanor paused, apparently expecting more. "That's your entire speech?" Bryn asked. "I expected outrage, tears, an appeal to your conscience?" Bryn tilted her head. "I've had a week to get over the outrage. And I did my crying alone, privately, which is where it belongs." She turned her coffee cup slowly. "Here's what I think, Eleanor. I think you're smart. I think you love this pack and you'd do anything for it. I think you saw a situation you could control and you moved on it before anyone could say no." Eleanor watched her. "I also think," Bryn continued, "that you don't actually know what you got. You saw a useful piece. A pregnant woman from a connected family who could be managed. You moved her into position without looking closely enough." She leaned forward slightly. "That was your mistake. You think I underestimated you. I know you did. No heat in it, just precision. I've been underestimated by better people than you, no offense. My mother has spent 20 years trying to make me small enough to be manageable. She hasn't managed it yet." Something shifted in Eleanor's expression, not quite respect, an adjustment. "You understand what this pack is," Eleanor said. It wasn't quite a question. "I understand enough. I understand that Grayson leads it. I understand that what I carry might be part of it. I understand that there are people here whose lives depend on stability and good leadership." She met Eleanor's eyes. "I'm not your enemy, Eleanor. I'm not a piece to be moved either. What I am is something you haven't figured out yet. And until you do, I'd suggest we keep things respectful." The kitchen was very quiet. From the hallway came the sound of Grayson's footsteps. She'd learned their rhythm, and then he appeared in the doorway, reading the room with one glance. "Mother," he said. "Grayson." Eleanor didn't look away from Bryn. "Your wife is direct." "Yes," he said, "she is. She told me I underestimated her." "You did." He crossed to stand beside Bryn, not in front of her. Beside. The distinction was not lost on anyone. "You underestimated both of us." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then slowly, she turned to face her son. "The pack is asking questions," she said. "About her, about what she is to you, about whether—" "She's my wife," Grayson said. "The mother of my child. Whatever the pack needs to know, that's the beginning of it. They'll want to meet her. They will, on our timeline, not yours." Eleanor looked between them. Her son, steady and immovable, and this woman in a paint-stained sweater who had sat in her son's kitchen and looked her in the eye without a single moment of intimidation. "She's not what I expected," Eleanor said finally to Grayson. "No," he agreed. "She rarely is." Eleanor set down her coffee. She looked at Bryn one more time, with an expression that was not warmth, but was something more complicated than hostility. "The pack gathers Thursday evenings," she said. "If you want to understand what you've become part of, that's when you'd see it." She left. The apartment was quiet. Bryn picked up her coffee and took a sip. Grayson leaned against the island across from her, watching. "You didn't warn me she was coming," Bryn said. "I didn't know she was coming." "Your mother has a key to your apartment." "Had," he said. "I changed the locks 20 minutes ago, remotely." He held up his phone. Bryn looked at him. "She needed to know," he said simply, "that things are different now." She felt that thing again, the dangerous one, the one she kept filing away. She took another sip of decaf and pretended it was enough of a shield. "Thursday," she said. "Tell me what to expect." "Honesty," he said, "and people who can tell immediately whether you mean what you say." She nodded. She could do that. What she didn't realize yet, what the pack would understand the moment she walked through the door, was that the Alpha had chosen, with or without ceremony, with or without intention. The mate bond recognized what the mind was still catching up to, and on Thursday the pack would see it too. She woke at 3:14 in the morning with the specific and irrational certainty that she needed crackers. This was not unusual anymore. The first trimester, she was learning, operated on its own logic. Hunger that arrived sideways, at angles, in the middle of the night, announcing itself as non-negotiable. Bryn got up. She moved through the dark apartment without turning on the main lights, navigating by the ambient glow of the city pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Manhattan at 3 a.m. was still lit, quieter, but never dark. She found this reassuring in a way she hadn't expected when she moved in. She was halfway through her second cracker when she heard the refrigerator open behind her. She didn't startle. She'd stopped startling at his quiet movements around day 4. "Sorry," Grayson said. "I didn't realize you were up." "I'm always up at some point. The baby has opinions about the hours." He had a glass of water. He leaned against the counter on his side of the kitchen and looked out at the city. He was in a dark t-shirt and sweatpants, hair slightly uneven from sleep, and she added this to the mental file of details that were becoming normal. The way he looked at 3 in the morning, the specific quiet of him, the way the city light caught the gray of his eyes. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "I sleep lightly, always have." He turned the water glass slowly. Occupational habit. Being an alpha. Always aware of the pack. Even when I'm not consciously attending to it, there's, he paused, choosing words, an awareness, like a background frequency. Like a radio you can't fully turn off. Exactly like that. He looked at her. I've never heard someone describe it so accurately. I grew up in Vivian Calloway's house. I learned very early to keep background frequencies running. She ate another cracker. You're always watching for trouble. Always watching for people who need something. Trouble is one category. He was quiet for a moment. The pack here, they're not just hierarchy, there are families, children, people who came to New York without much and built something here because the pack provided stability. That's what it's supposed to be. Protection, not power. You sound like you've had to explain that to people. Many times, there are older pack members who remember a different model, harder, more territorial. He set down his glass. My father led differently than I do. He was a good alpha in the ways that mattered, loyal, protective, but his approach to strength was a pause, louder. And yours isn't. I find that people don't actually need to be afraid of you to follow you. They need to trust you. Bryn looked at him for a long moment. You believe that, she said. That's not a philosophy. You actually live it. I try to. He looked out at the city. I don't always succeed. I've made decisions that were wrong. I've been too controlled when I should have let people see what I was feeling. I've held the pack together sometimes at the cost of... He stopped. At the cost of what? He was quiet. You don't have to answer, she said. No, He turned the glass again. At the cost of being known, personally, It's easier to lead well when people see the role clearly, harder when they see the person. She understood that. She understood it in a way that went straight through the sarcasm and the armor and the 11 exit routes she kept mapped at every event. "I'm good at my job," she said. "I'm a genuinely good designer. And I'm very funny, which not everyone appreciates, but the people who do are the right people." She paused. "And I grew up being told I was a problem. Too loud, too much, too inconvenient. And I figured out that if I was useful enough, strategic enough, if I never needed anything out loud, nobody could use what you needed against you," he said. She looked at him. "Yes," she said. They stood in the kitchen in the 3 a.m. quiet. The city moved below them, steady and indifferent and somehow comforting in its constancy. "My mother did that," he said. "Not intentionally, but she needed me to be alpha. Always. From very young. And I learned to be what the pack needed because it was easier than figuring out what you needed." Yes. The silence was different now, thicker, warmer. Something in it that wasn't just the lack of noise. He moved around the island, just slightly, closing the comfortable distance they'd maintained for 2 weeks. Not all the way, just enough that she was aware of it. "The night at the bar," he said quietly. "I was there because it was the one place I went where nobody knew what I was. The pack doesn't go to that bar. I've kept it," he almost smiled, "separate. One evening a month where I'm not the alpha, just a person. And then I sat down next to you. You didn't sit next to me. You took the stool 2 down and argued with yourself about whether to order the expensive whiskey for 12 minutes before deciding you deserved it." She stared at him. "You were watching me for 12 minutes before we spoke? You were interesting," he said simply. She felt warmth move through her that she refused to name. He was close enough now that she could see the details of his face clearly. The slight shadow of stubble, the line of exhaustion around his eyes that was structural, permanent, the kind you carried. "Grayson," she said. "Yes." "Stop being..." She paused. "Stop being so... I'm not doing anything." "You're doing something," she said. "The thing where you're honest and present and you listen and you..." He leaned forward, not all the way, the same careful distance, but halved, his eyes on hers, a question without words. She didn't move back. She also didn't move forward. They stayed there, in the particular breathless stillness of a moment that could go one way or the other, while the city hummed 42 floors below, and the baby that had started all of this made its small, insistent presence known. And Bryn's phone, sitting on the counter, lit up with a text from Vivian. 11 words. She saw it from the corner of her eye and felt the warmth drain out of the room like water. She stepped back. The moment passed. "I should sleep," she said. "The crackers worked. Usually they work." "Good," he said. His voice was careful again. Even. "Sleep well." She went back to her room. She lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and did not read the text from her mother for a very long time. Whatever that had almost been, she needed to figure out what she was standing on before she took another step. The problem was, the ground kept feeling more solid every day, and that was the part that scared her most. The text had been a summons. Bryn had known it before she opened it. She'd known from the number, from the time it was sent. Her mother did not text at 3 a.m. out of warmth, from the particular shape of the notification on her screen. She'd waited until morning to read it, which was one of the few defenses she had left. Lunch today, the club, noon, don't be late. She went. She went because Vivian always collected on her silences, and a refusal now would become a weapon later. She went because she was still gathering information, and information required proximity. She went because there was something she needed to understand about the full dimensions of the arrangement her mother had made, and she wasn't going to find it from 42 floors above the west side. The club was exactly what it sounded like. Old wood and heavy curtains, and the particular smell of money that had been in the same rooms for decades. Vivienne was already seated, back straight, menu set aside, looking like a woman who had never been inconvenienced by anything. "You look better than I expected," Vivienne said when Bryn sat down. "I look exactly as I always do." "You look settled." Bryn picked up the menu. "I'm not going to talk about my marriage to you. I'm going to have lunch. I wanted to see how you were. You wanted to check your investment." Vivienne's expression didn't change. "I wanted to make sure the situation was stable." "The situation?" Bryn set down the menu. "You mean the arrangement you made, the one where you took my medical information and used it as a bargaining chip without my consent?" "I secured your future, Bryn, and the child's—" "Stop!" The word came out quietly, but with enough precision that Vivienne actually stopped. "I want you to listen to me very carefully, because I'm going to say this once and I mean all of it." She leaned forward slightly. "What you did was a violation, not a strategy, not a difficult choice. A violation of my privacy, my autonomy, and whatever is left between us that resembles a mother and daughter. You were in an impossible situation. I was in a situation I could have handled, on my own timeline, with my own choices." Her voice stayed level. "I know you don't believe that. I know you have never believed I can handle anything without your architecture around it. But here's what you got wrong, Mom." She used the word deliberately, like a punctuation mark. "You moved me into a position thinking I was a piece, and you didn't account for the fact that I'm a person." Vivienne was silent. "I want to know the full terms," Bryn said, "of what you arranged with Eleanor Mercer." A pause. "It's not—" "Tell me." The waiter arrived. They ordered mechanically. When he left, Vivienne set down her water glass with the careful precision of someone deciding how much to reveal. "The Calloway name carries social access the Mercer Pack wanted. Connections in the arts community, in certain city institutions, in philanthropic circles where they'd been trying to gain ground." She kept her voice neutral. "Eleanor needed a human-facing alliance, someone whose family could move in spaces the Pack couldn't access directly. I provided that. And in return, financial backing for the Calloway Foundation, enough to keep it operational for the next 15 years. Bryn sat with that. The foundation, her grandmother's project. The arts organization that Vivienne had nearly run into the ground with bad management and worse decisions, and refused to admit needed saving. The thing that Vivienne would do almost anything to protect, because it was the one piece of her legacy she genuinely cared about. "You sold me," Bryn said, "for the foundation. I secured the foundation's future, which required giving me to a man neither of us knew, under false pretenses, without my consent." She felt the full weight of it now, not just hurt, but something quieter and more thorough. The knowledge of what she'd been worth, precisely measured in her mother's accounting. "How much does he know, Grayson? Does he know about the financial arrangement?" "He knows there was a mutual benefit, but not the specifics." Vivienne said nothing. Bryn stood up. She put her napkin on the table. "I'm going to tell him," she said. "Everything, the full terms. You should know that. Bryn, and then I'm going to decide what to do next. On my timeline, without your input." She picked up her bag. "I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen, but I'm also not going to destroy what's left of this." She paused. "Whatever we are to each other, we'll figure out what that means. Later, when I'm ready." She walked out. She walked 4 blocks before she stopped, stood on a sidewalk in the middle of Manhattan, and let the full enormity of it land. Not the tears. She was done with those. She'd spent them in private already. Just the weight. The specific, exhausting weight of being someone's means to an end, dressed up as love. She called Grayson. He answered on the second ring. "Bryn, I need you to know something," she said. About the full arrangement our mothers made. Can I come home? A beat, small and significant. I'll be here, he said. She walked to the subway. She rode uptown. She watched the city move outside the windows. Ordinary people, ordinary lives, thousands of private stories running in parallel. And she thought about a pack that protected its own, and a man who sat on floors and answered questions honestly and changed his locks at 9 in the morning. She thought, I didn't choose this, any of it. And then, but I'm choosing what comes next. When she got home, Grayson was in the kitchen. He'd made tea, actual tea, something herbal, the kind she'd mentioned once in passing that she could stomach in the mornings. She sat down. She told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, the apartment was quiet, and his expression was controlled in the way that meant something was moving underneath it. I'm sorry, he said. It's not yours to apologize for. I'm sorry it happened. I'm sorry you carried it to a restaurant alone. He pushed the tea toward her. What do you need? She wrapped her hands around the mug. I need to know if you want to stay in this, she said, knowing the whole shape of it, what it was built on, whether you... Bryn. She looked up. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Not because of the arrangement, not because of the pack, because of... He stopped. Something moved through his expression, careful and very real. Because of you, the person in front of me. The one who takes notes on a legal pad and argues with terrible clients and asks the right questions and faces my mother without blinking. She stared at him. I want you to stay, he said quietly. But I need that to be your choice, completely and entirely yours. The mate bond, she would understand later, had already answered, but it waited, patient as the moon, for her. She brought up the divorce on a Wednesday. She had been thinking about it for 2 days, carefully, honestly, the way she thought through everything. She sat across from him at the kitchen island with her decaf and her notepad, and she put it on the table plainly. She thought they should consider whether staying married was actually what either of them would choose, freed from circumstance. You deserve to choose this, she said. Actually choose it. Not because of the pack or the baby or your mother's deal or mine. And I deserve the same. Grayson listened. He nodded. He said nothing for a long moment, and then something changed. She had seen him controlled. She had seen him careful, measured, precise. She had seen him angry in the quiet way, the way where the temperature of the room shifted slightly, and his jaw set, and his eyes got a specific quality of grey that meant something was being held firmly in place. She had not yet seen him break through, controlled. He stood up. He moved to the window and stood there for a moment, looking at the city, and she waited. No, he said. She blinked. Grayson, no. He turned around. I understand the argument. It's a good argument. It's exactly the kind of thing I would say if our positions were reversed, and it's coming from the most honest place, and I know that. He crossed back to the island, stopped on her side of it for the first time, 2 feet away. And no. She looked up at him. You can't just say, you have spent 2 days, he said, building the most careful, logical, considerate case for walking away from something, and the entire time you've been building it, you've been doing it to protect me, not yourself, me. His voice was low, exact. You think you're a complication I got trapped with. You think the decent thing to do is give me an exit. She opened her mouth. You're wrong, he said. You don't know. I know you. He held her gaze. You came into my life in a bar in August and argued about pizza for 45 minutes, and you laughed at my terrible structural engineering joke, and you listened to me the way almost nobody actually listens, like what I said mattered as a thing in itself and not as information to be used. He was very still. And then you left, and I thought about you for 8 weeks, every single day. She stared at him. I didn't know your name, he said. I looked. I went back to that bar twice. I told myself it was nothing. One evening, one conversation, one person who probably forgot me completely. Something crossed his face, more vulnerable than she'd seen him allow before. I hadn't forgotten a thing. Grayson, there's something in what we are, he said, quieter now, that recognizes its match. The pack calls it the mate bond. It doesn't always happen. It's rare. He stopped. I felt it the night I met you. I thought I was wrong. I thought it wasn't possible that fast, that certain. I talked myself out of it for 8 weeks. She was very still. You're my match, he said. That's not the arrangement our mothers made. It's not the legal document. It's not the pack or the pregnancy or anything else. It's just you, the actual person, the one who takes up 3 pages of notes to understand a new situation and calls her mother's bluff from across a restaurant table and sits on the floor because I'm sitting on the floor. She could feel her heart doing something irregular. So no, he said, you don't get to leave, not like this. Not because you've decided I deserve better and assigned yourself the role of the gracious sacrifice. The smallest, most devastating, almost smile. You deserve better than that narrative, Bryn. She stood up. They were close now. Closer than the kitchen at 3 a.m. Close enough that she could see the pulse in his jaw, the exact shade of grey of his eyes in the afternoon light. This is the part, she said, where I say something sarcastic and deflect. I know, he said. I've been waiting for it. She breathed in, out. I thought about you too, she said. Every day. I told myself it was nothing. I was extremely convincing. He was very still. I'm not good at this, she said. She gestured between them. The trusting, the letting people in. I built my whole life around not needing anything loudly enough for someone to use it. I know. You do the same thing. I know that too. She looked at him. This is terrifying. Yes, he said, completely honest. It is. But you're not backing away. No. And you want me to stay. I want you to choose to stay. There's a difference. She felt it again. That thing she'd been filing away for 3 weeks, the one she'd refused to name. She stopped filing it. She looked at it directly in the afternoon light, 42 floors above the city. It looked like, I trust you. It looked like, I don't want to leave either. She lifted her hand and put it flat against his chest, felt his heart, faster than the controlled exterior suggested. He covered her hand with his, and then she felt it, small, unmistakable. For the very first time, she gasped. He went completely still. What? The baby, she whispered. She looked down. Her hand was still under his, pressed between them. The baby just moved. For a moment, neither of them breathed. Grayson, slowly, carefully, moved their joined hands from his chest to her side. He kept his over hers. They stood there in the afternoon light while the city hummed and the world went about its ordinary business below them. A flutter, small and extraordinary. His expression, the controlled, careful alpha face, came undone entirely. She watched it happen. She watched Grayson Mercer, who led a pack of werewolves and ran a company and faced everything with measured composure, go completely unguarded. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Hi, he said very quietly, to the space below their hands. Like a word he'd been saving. Bryn Calloway, who didn't cry in front of people, who kept her feelings filed in separate rooms, who had built a life out of needing nothing loudly, felt her eyes fill anyway. She didn't file it away this time. She let it be exactly what it was. The challenge came on a Thursday night, at a pack gathering she had not been warned would become something else entirely. The pack met in a building the Mercer Group owned in the meat-packing district. A converted warehouse, 3 floors, the upper level a gathering space that felt nothing like what Bryn had expected. It was warm. There were families, Actual families, children running between tables, grandparents in the corners, teenagers pretending not to be curious. Someone had brought food enough for a small city. The smell was something close to cedar and something she didn't have a word for yet, but was learning to associate with belonging. She had met them over 3 weeks, slowly, at Grayson's pace and hers. A dinner here, an introduction there. She had been honest. She was always honest. It was the only mode she reliably operated in, and the pack had watched her the way you watch something unfamiliar that might become trusted. She was 5 months along now, visibly. There was no hiding it, and she hadn't tried. The challenge came from a man named Declan, older pack, silver at his temples, the kind of wolf who had been doing things a certain way for decades and had a specific and vocal opinion about the Mercer line diluting itself with a human who didn't shift, couldn't protect herself, couldn't protect anyone. He said it in the open gathering. He was within his right, apparently. Pack law allowed challenges to the Alpha's decisions in certain circumstances, and Declan had decided this was one of them. "She's not one of us," he said. Not cruelly, but with the flat certainty of someone stating what he believed was obvious. The Alpha's heir should be born of full wolf blood. This arrangement, whatever it is, weakens the pack's standing. The room had gone very quiet. Bryn felt 300 pairs of eyes. She felt Grayson, one step to her right, go absolutely still, in the way that meant the wolf was very present and very controlled. She put her hand on his arm, just barely. He looked at her. She stepped forward. "Can I respond?" she asked, of the room, not of Declan specifically. Grayson said, "The floor is yours." She faced Declan. She looked at him directly. The way she'd learned mattered here. Not aggression, not submission, just presence. She was getting better at this. She had good teachers. "You're worried about the pack," she said. Declan blinked. He'd expected something else. "Yes. You've given years to protecting it. You've been here longer than most people in this room. You've seen bad decisions cost people who couldn't afford the cost." She kept her voice level. "I understand why someone who loves this pack would look at me and see a risk. A human who doesn't understand what we are. I understand quite a lot," she said. "I've spent 5 months learning, not because I was told to, because I wanted to understand what my child is going to grow up as part of." She looked at the room. "I'm not going to pretend I'm something I'm not. I don't shift. I'm not a wolf. I came into this through circumstances that none of us would have chosen." She paused. Let the room be quiet. "But I have spent my entire life being told I wasn't enough," she said. "Too human, too loud, too inconvenient, too much. And I'm standing here telling you that every time someone told me I was too small to matter, I got up anyway." Her voice was very steady. "I'm not asking you to trust me today. Trust is earned, and I know I haven't finished earning it. But I'm asking you to give me the same thing I'll give every person in this room, a fair accounting. Judge me by what I do, not by what I'm not." The room was very still. A small girl, maybe 7, the daughter of one of the pack families Bryn had met 2 weeks earlier, crossed the floor with the complete confidence of small children and took Bryn's hand. Bryn looked down. The girl looked up. The room breathed. "She smells like pack," the little girl announced with absolute authority. Laughter broke through the silence, warm, surprised, genuine. Declan's rigid expression shifted, not convinced but moved. There was a difference, and Bryn knew it. She'd take moved. Grayson was at her side, not in front, beside. "Does anyone else have a challenge?" he asked. No one moved. Later, after the gathering, in the quiet of the drive home, the city streaming past the windows, Grayson was silent for a long moment. "You didn't need me," he said finally. "I didn't need you to fight for me. she said. "I needed you to let me fight." He looked at her. "That's the difference," she said. "And you knew it." He reached over and took her hand. "Just held it, simple and real. The pack accepted you tonight," he said. "What the girl did, that's not sentiment, that's instinct. Pack instinct. They recognized you." "As what?" He was quiet for a moment, then carefully, "As the alpha's mate." She let that land, let it be real instead of filed. "Is that what I am?" she said. "I think," he said, "you've been exactly that since August. The rest of us have just been catching up." She looked out at the city, at the lights moving past. "The marking," she said. She'd learned enough to know what it meant. "That's what makes it permanent, what you told me about the bond." "Yes. Is it something you want?" He stopped at a red light. The city glowed around them. He turned to look at her fully. "I want it more than anything I've ever wanted," he said. "But only if you want it, completely, not because of the pack or the baby or anything except that you choose me." The light changed. The city moved. She held his hand and said nothing for 3 blocks. Then, "Ask me again at home." He did. She said yes. Wren Mercer arrived in March. She arrived at 4:47 in the morning in a room that smelled like cedar and something warm and ancient, with a pack of people Bryn had come to call her own, filling the hallway outside the door with a quiet that felt like prayer. Grayson didn't leave. Not once. Not for a single minute. He held her hand and talked her through it, and at one point said something so specific and so honestly terrible. "I have negotiated with 3 separate alpha factions, and I am significantly more afraid right now than I have ever been in my life." That she laughed, which the nurses said was a good sign, and which Bryn knew was just him, exactly as he was. Wren came into the world at 4:47 a.m. and opened her eyes. They were grey, the particular shade of grey that Bryn now knew from the inside, the way you know a place you've lived in long enough. "Hello," Grayson said to his daughter. The same word he'd said to her 5 months before, through Bryn's skin. Like he'd been waiting to say it properly. Bryn watched him hold his daughter for the first time. This man, this alpha, this controlled and careful person who had crossed a room in a cathedral because something in him had recognized something in her, and felt the mate bond settle into its permanent shape. Not a weight, an anchor. The difference between those two things was everything. 1 year later. The bar was called Sullivan's, and it was exactly as she remembered it. The slightly sticky bar top, the good whiskey selection, the particular light that was just dim enough to feel honest. It was a Tuesday in August. The city outside was warm and full of itself, the way New York always was in summer. Bryn sat on a bar stool and ordered her whiskey on the rocks. Grayson sat down beside her. Wren was at home. She was with Eleanor, which was something nobody could have predicted a year ago, but Eleanor Mercer, when confronted with her granddaughter's first knowing look at age 4 months, had quietly and completely reorganized her priorities. Wren had a way of doing that to people. "She has your eyes," Bryn had told Eleanor once. "She has Grayson's eyes," Eleanor said. "Same thing," Bryn said. And Eleanor had been quiet for a moment before saying, almost to herself, "Yes, I suppose it is." The bar was quiet for a Tuesday, the same jazz from somewhere in the back. Grayson looked exactly as he had a year ago. Same grey eyes, same dark hair, same quality of attention that made you feel like the room had narrowed to just this. He looked at her. She looked at him. 1 year, she said. 1 year. He agreed. "I want to say something," she said. "You can say anything." She turned on her stool to face him. "You were right about the mate bond, about all of it. And I want you to know that even if none of that existed, even if I was just a person who sat in this bar on a bad day in August, I would have found my way to you." She held his gaze. Not because of destiny, because of who you are. He was very still. You listened, she said. You told me the truth. You gave me space and never made that feel like distance. You changed your locks. She almost smiled. You sat on the floor. I sit on the floor regularly, he said. I know. I love that about you. The word moved between them in the quiet of the bar. She'd said it before, in the dark after the marking, in the particular honesty of 3 a.m., but she said it here deliberately, in the place where it had all started, with the whiskey she now allowed herself occasionally and the jazz playing low. He reached into his jacket pocket. She watched him. He set something on the bar between them. Small. A card. Heavy cream paper, with a crest she now knew well. On it, in his handwriting, 3 words. She looked at him. I left the first one on purpose, he said. The morning after. I put it in your bag before you woke up. I didn't know your name, I didn't have your number, and I knew that I couldn't just let it end. Something in his expression was more open than she'd ever seen him in public. I hoped you'd find a way to trace it. I checked that bar every Tuesday for 6 weeks. She stared at him. You were hoping I'd come find you, she said. I was desperately hoping you'd come find me, he said. Yes. She looked at the card. His loss. Mine. You absolute disaster, she said. He smiled, the full one, not the almost, and she had not yet figured out how to be unmoved by that smile and had genuinely stopped trying. I love you, he said. I have loved you from a bar stool in August. I will love you until there is no more city and no more moon and nothing left to anchor us to this particular version of existence. He said it the way he said everything that mattered, quiet, exact, with the full weight of someone who does not say things they don't mean. I love you, Bryn. She picked up her whiskey. I love you too, she said. I have loved you from the moment you laughed at my pizza argument and meant it. She clinked her glass to his. Which makes us both disasters. It seems accurate. We're going to be fine, she said. We're going to be extraordinary, he said. Outside, the city hummed its permanent frequency. Above it, above the bridges and the parks and the towers of glass, the August moon was rising, full and unhurried. The same moon that had watched over wolf and human and chosen family for as long as the pack had existed. It watched over Sullivan's Bar, where a woman with paint-stained instincts and a man with grey wolf eyes sat shoulder to shoulder over 2 glasses of whiskey, and felt something that had no name except right. The bond between them was permanent, ancient, chosen. And on the Upper West Side, 42 floors above a city that never looked closely enough to notice the extraordinary living inside it, a little girl with grey eyes slept through the night for the first time, dreaming in whatever language babies dream in, half human, half wolf, all Mercer, all theirs. Hook. She was being forced to marry a stranger to hide her pregnancy, and when the man at the altar turned around and whispered, "Do you remember me?" her whole world stopped, because she knew that voice, that face, that August night she'd spent 8 weeks trying to forget. She had no idea he was an alpha, no idea his world ran secret and ancient beneath New York streets, and she had absolutely no idea that the baby she was carrying had just made her part of something that couldn't be undone. Welcome to Studios Aurora. We're so glad you're here. Drop your name, where you're watching from, and how you'd rate this story in the comments. We read every single one. CTA, if this story pulled at your heart, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. New stories drop every week. Tell us in the comments. Did you see that altar twist coming? We love hearing from you. YouTube description. She was forced to marry a stranger to cover a secret. He was told to show up to a wedding without knowing who was waiting at the altar. When their eyes met in that cathedral, everything changed, because they already knew each other. One night, one bar, An August that neither of them had been able to forget. But Grayson Mercer wasn't just a man. He was the alpha of New York's most powerful werewolf pack. And the baby she was carrying was already changing both their worlds in ways neither of them could predict. A story about forced marriage, second chances, and the kind of love that doesn't wait for permission. Chapters 000, The Wrong Dress, 000, Do You Remember Me? 00. His last name, 000, the word she didn't say, 000. Wolves don't bite, usually. Dome, Half Moon Baby, Dome, Queen of Comebacks, Dome, 3 a.m. Confessions, Dome, Her Mother's Deal, Dome, You Don't Get to Leave, Dome, The Marking, Dome, Always You, Just Werewolf, Romance, Just Forced Marriage, Just Paranormal Romance, Just Fated Mates, Jalfa Wolf, Wolf Story, Audio Story, Just Romance Story, Just Secret Pregnancy, Enemies to Lovers, Just Studio Saudora, Just Love Beyond the Moon, Just Slow Burn, Just Mate Bond, Just Mike Romance. Suscríbete para más historias cada semana. Inscreva-se para novas histórias toda semana. He woke on the couch. That was the first wrong thing. Grayson didn't sleep on the couch. He hadn't slept on the couch in years, not since he was 23, and had fallen asleep reading packed logistics reports and woken up with a crick in his neck that had lasted 4 days. He had a bed, a good one, he used it, and yet the apartment was grey with early morning light, the city beginning its low hum outside the windows, and he was on the couch with a blanket he didn't remember getting, wearing the clothes he'd worn the night before, with the particular disoriented weight of someone who hadn't so much slept as been submerged. He sat up slowly. The apartment was quiet. Not the comfortable quiet he'd grown used to. The quiet that had Bryn in it somewhere, her sounds, her movements, the specific texture of her presence that he'd stopped noticing because it had become the baseline. This was a different quiet, older, emptier. He stood. Bryn. His voice sounded strange, flat, like it had nowhere to land. He moved through the apartment, kitchen, hallway, her room, his room, the nursery, and the wrongness of it hit him in increments, each room worse than the last. Her things. He kept looking for her things. The notepad she left on the kitchen island. The specific brand of decaf she'd finally found that she didn't hate. The small collection of design books she'd brought over 3 weeks into living here, arranged on the shelf with the particular system only she understood. Gone, not moved, not reorganized. Gone, with the clean thoroughness of something that had been carefully, deliberately removed. He stood in the doorway of the nursery. The crib was there. He'd assembled it himself on a Sunday afternoon in February, with Bryn reading the instructions aloud in a voice of theatrical suffering, because the diagrams were, in her professional design opinion, a crime against clarity. The mobile above it, small silver moons, her choice, still turned slowly in the draft from the hallway. But the small things were gone. The blankets, the clothes folded in the drawer, the soft toy shaped like a wolf that one of the pack members had left anonymously outside the apartment door. Wren. The name hit him like a physical thing. He moved back through the apartment faster now, pulling out his phone, calling her number, and getting nothing. Not voicemail. Nothing. Like the number had been scrubbed from existence. He called the pack's emergency line, got Marcus, his second, who answered on the first ring with the careful voice of someone who had been awake and waiting. "Tell me," Grayson said. A pause that told him everything before the words did. "They were gone when we did the 4 a.m. sweep," Marcus said. "Clean exit, no signs of..." "It wasn't forced, Gray. Whatever happened, it happened quietly." "Eleanor." Another pause. "We haven't been able to reach her either," Marcus said. "Her apartment is empty. Her car is gone. She took..." He stopped. "She took the Calloway file, the full documentation of the arrangement." Grayson stood in the center of his living room and felt the mate bond. permanent, ancient, chosen, pull in the direction of empty space, like a compass pointing at something that had been moved. She was alive. He knew that with the certainty of the bond itself. Wherever she was alive. Both of them, but she was gone. He stood there for a long moment. The city hummed, the mobile in the nursery turned. He tried to assemble what he knew into something with edges, because that was what he did. He took impossible things and found their shape and worked with what was real. What was real? Eleanor had taken them. His mother, who loved the pack more than anything, who had looked at his wife and his daughter and calculated somehow that they were a liability. That the human woman and her half-wolf child were a threat to something she'd spent decades protecting. What was real? Bryn had not left on her own. He knew that too, with the same bone-deep certainty. She had chosen him. She had said so in a bar in August, 1 year after they began, with whiskey and honesty and everything she had. She would not have left. He walked to the chair by the window, the one she'd claimed as hers in the second week, turning it slightly toward the view, which she'd said was the only reasonable orientation, and stopped. Folded over the arm of the chair, her jacket, the olive green one she wore constantly, the one with the paint stain on the left cuff that she'd never bothered to remove because she said it was a mark of a person who actually worked. She'd had it since before him. She'd been wearing it the night at the bar. He picked it up. It smelled like her, cedar and something warm and the faint trace of the mate bond, the specific, irreplaceable frequency of the person the universe had decided was his. He'd left a card in her bag once, hoping she'd find her way back to him. She'd left her jacket. He stood there in the grey morning light holding it and felt something move through him that wasn't grief and wasn't rage, but was something older and more absolute than either. The kind of thing that doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives, settles, and becomes the thing you're built around. He was going to find them, not because of the pack, not because of the bond or the law or anything that could be written in a document or argued in a council meeting. Because Bryn Calloway had sat on his floor and asked the right questions and trusted him with the truth of herself. And he had promised her, not in ceremony, not in words anyone else had witnessed, that she would never face anything alone again. He set her jacket down carefully on the chair. He picked up his phone and called Marcus back. "Get everyone," he said. "Full pack. I want every contact we have across every territory activated by 8 a.m. His voice was very calm, the particular calm of someone who has decided something completely. "And find my mother. And when we find her, she's going to tell me where my family is," Grayson said, "and then she's going to understand what she's taken from me." He ended the call. He stood at the window for a long moment, looking out at the city. His city, his territory, 8 million people, and the hidden world beneath the surface of all of it. Somewhere out there, moving through the world he knew better than anyone, was a woman with paint-stained instincts, and a little girl with grey eyes, and a laugh that was going to sound, someday, exactly like her mother's. He would find them. He would bring them home. And Eleanor Mercer, who had moved people like chess pieces her whole life, who had never understood that the strongest thing in a pack was not strategy or territory or bloodline, but the irreducible fact of love that had decided to be permanent. Eleanor Mercer had no idea what was coming. Grayson put on his coat. He walked out the door, and somewhere in the city the autumn moon, patient, ancient, unwilling to be argued with, rose over Manhattan and waited. But this is not the end. Because while Bryn and Grayson were building something real, someone was watching. Someone who believed she was protecting the pack. Someone who made a decision in the middle of the night that changed everything. Bryn woke up in a house she didn't recognize, in a city she didn't choose, with her daughter in her arms and no way to reach him. And Grayson woke up on the couch, alone, with nothing but her jacket on the chair to prove it had all been real. What happens next? Who took them? What does little Wren carry inside her that made an entire pack of wolves lie down in the grass? The continuation of this story, Find Her,